In this video, we're going to start a new drawing and set up some layers and talk about how to use layers in AutoCAD. So click on New, start up with a new drawing. We'll turn off the grid and turn off the view cube just to get it clear. So there's a whole layers section of the home ribbon that we'll talk about a little bit, but the first thing I want to do is just open up a layer properties box. This is where we can add layers to our drawing just by clicking Alt N or clicking on this icon up at the top here. So the first layer I want to add is the object layer. So we're going to abbreviate most of these. So the first layer here, object, we'll pick a color. I'm going to pick somewhat darker colors for my lighter background to contrast with them. Also, we want to pick the line type and the line weight. Now the line type is whether it's dashed or what kind of dash pattern it might have, or if it's continuous, it's just a solid line. The line weight itself is how thick the line is. Now, object lines should be thicker than most of the other lines in a drawing so that the object stands out. So we're going to use 0.53 millimeters, which is about the equivalent of a 0.5 millimeter lead pencil tilted. Anyway, so there's my object line. Now I'm going to add another one, and it's going to add another layer with the same settings as the previous one, so just be aware of that. But the next most common type of line might be a hidden line. I'll pick a different color. Now, I think it's important to use different colors for your different layers, if it helps, so you can tell which line is on which layer, and so you can keep track of them, I think, easier. So 0.25 millimeters is the default, so I'm going to just pick default for the hidden lines. So hidden lines are going to be thin and dashed. So the line weight, thin, or just default, and not continuous this time, but when you first start, you'll have to load up some line types here. I'm just going to load the hidden line type. Now there's a bunch in here, and you can make your own even, but I'm just going to pick hidden. Pick it from the list once I've loaded it, and then so now I have a hidden line type with a default thickness for my hidden layer to represent lines that are edges of parts that are occluded by a surface. Now let's add another one. Center lines are also very common, so we're just going to abbreviate that. Make a nice little orange color or brown. And the line type this time is going to be center, which is the dash pattern is like the hidden, but alternating in long and short dashes. So back to center. Here's the center line type. Center, so long dash, long dash, instead of just a series of short dashes for the hidden line type. We're going to add quite a few here, so I'm going to go down a list. Construction lines are also used to generate the construction or the geometry that you need. So we'll abbreviate that CONS. I'll make that a gray, and it should be continuous and a default thickness. So these will be lines that will often be frozen after you use them. So that's what we'll talk about, these other features for the layer later. Let's add these layers in here. So dimensions also used to specify the lengths or the dimensions of the lines. Typically that text kind of stuff, I would use a red. These colors are totally up to you. And continuous and thin default line. Also text or notes for annotation. I'll leave that as red and continuous also. Then we get to where we want to put a border and your name and date and the title and all that kind of stuff in your drawing. So we're gonna add a board layer. So the border of the layer is going to be thicker. So the line weight is going to be all the way up to 1.2 millimeters. So a nice thick continuous line. Just pick a brown for that. So that's just going to be the border that goes around the drawing. Now, inside that border, we'll have another border or sub border, if you will, for the title block, which contains the drawing number and the scale and things. So we'll have what we call a key block layer. And it'll be less thick. I'll just pick a slightly different brown. Half the thickness, so 0.6 millimeters for that border that goes around the elements of the name and the textual elements for the drawing itself. The the next one will be for the text that goes inside of that. So we'll abbreviate that or text. That kind of a red also, just a plain red. And that's going to be the default thickness and continuous, no dashing on that. So that'll take care of our border and our title block. Some other layers that are slightly less used would be sometimes a drawing has parts that are not in their position that they normally would be, like a crank arm or something. So those got frozen. I must have accidentally clicked that. Anyway, a phantom layer will show lines part in an alternate position. So it's showing the same part somewhere else. So it's not to confuse that there's actually two parts there, but just one. So it needs to be a default thickness also, but the continuity, the dash pattern is slightly different. There's actually a phantom, which is sort of like a center line, but dashed, two small dashes between longer dashes, so phantom line type. That's the purpose for those. So phantom. The next one. Often we will use paper space to lay out things, and so edges or borders of elements that we don't want to see, or basically the border of viewports will be on a layer so that we can just freeze them. So it really doesn't matter what color they are. But again, and the continuous line type, that doesn't matter so much either, but that'll be for the viewport boundaries that we can freeze. Just a few more. Sometimes we'll fill in areas with a pattern to show that it's solid material or a different kind of material. So that's going to be a hatch pattern. So we'll use a hatch layer, green for that. That's a little too bright. And it'll be continuous and default as well. And lastly, when we show something that's been cut open and hatch it with a certain pattern, we'll also want to show a line that will cut through it. So that's called a cut plane. So a cut plane line will show where you're cutting the object open. And we'll make that purpley color. That'll be nice. And it's going to be a little bit thicker, quite a bit thicker, 0.8 millimeters. This should take care of most of what we need to draw. I'm checking if I forgot anything. Guess not. These will be our layers. Now let's see what we can do with them. So if I want to draw, let's say, an arc. So here's the arc command. There's actually a lot of different ways you can draw an arc, but all of them, almost all of them, have to do with a radius, a start, and a center. So let's take a look at just the plane. Escape. I'm just going to hit A for arc. By default, the arc command needs just 3 clicks. 1, 2, and 3. And those 3 clicks were not this middle, that's just the middle of that arc, but the first and last clicks were where the arc started and where it ended. And it can be grip edited. So it's always a part of a circle. So let's try that again a little more deliberately. So that was just 3 random points here, but let's say I know where the center ought to be first, and then maybe just an angle or some radius. So I could start with the center. I could type in C in space, and let's say there's the center of the arc. Now it's asking for a start point. It does need. So let's go to the right, and I can go to the right here for a certain distance. Let's go 10. So now this arc will have a radius of 10 to start with. And I have a lot of options at this point for the end point of this arc, or the angle, or even if I know the chord length. So let's say I want to make it 45 degrees. I didn't need to actually specify the angle because my dynamic input was taking care of that. But if you didn't have that on, you could hit A for angle and then type in the angle that the arc is intended. So hovering over the endpoints, the dynamic input, the endpoint can tell you the length or the radius of that arc and its angle, central angle. Now that I have one arc, I can hit spacebar or enter to start another arc. And if I hit the spacebar one more time, it'll continue that arc with another arc that's tangent to it. So I could reverse this arc, pan, remember how to pan using the middle mouse wheel and holding it as a button. So at this point, I don't have a lot of control over the radius of this arc other than just manually dragging it around. I can track using my tracking and maybe certain angles and to get the diameter of that arc going. But anyway, just hitting space twice will continue the arcs and make sure that they're tangent to each other. It's one space here. Let's try, well, most of the time your arcs can be drawn with just the arc command and not having to pick from the list of arc commands, because all the options that they give you are found in that arc command, almost all. So let's just pick the end. Let's say I wanted the arc to be at this end and this end, and then now it's going to ask for the center point, or maybe I could just specify what the radius is. So if I specify a radius, well, with these two ends, as long as I pick a radius that's not too big or too small, something that looks like maybe over 7.5. So let's pick 8.5 for the radius. Oops. I just want to hit R for radius. And now it says specify, I'm reading my command line at the bottom, and it says specify the radius of the arc. So I'm going to say 8.5. And it tried to, that was a little bit much, I guess. And so now I have an arc that tried to connect to those two endpoints. So it has to mathematically match as well. Okay, here we've talked about the arcs. Let's just pan over and look at a circle. Similar to the arcs, I just want to start with a C for circle, knowing that there are many other ways to draw a circle. In this case, the most common is just finding where the center is, locating the center, and specifying either a radius or a diameter. The radius is the default. This can get a lot of people into trouble because a lot of times drawings and assignments in the book and will give you the diameter of circles, and that is kind of a standard, is that when you have a circle, the circles are dimensioned with other than a radius, and arcs are typically specified by their radius. So it's odd to me that the radius is the default for the circle, but that's fine. So all that needs to happen is, if you want to specify the diameter, just hit D and space or enter. And now you can still track out the number or whatever, but just typing in the number like 10 for the diameter will give you a radius of 5. So radius and diameter are related that way. When you grip edit a circle, the only thing you can do is, you can't specify the diameter here, however, with grip editing. On the keyboard will give you the properties of that circle, and then you can specify a new diameter by clicking here and type it in. There. So now this circle has a diameter of 15. What's also nice is you can specify the circumference. So here's a 45 unit circumference, which the AutoCAD will automatically calculate what that radius and diameter are. So interesting things that you can do with just the circle command. Okay, not to belabor this, but you can draw a circle with a center and radius, center and diameter, which we've done just by hitting C and space. Other circles that are useful would be a 2-point circle, basically a circle that has to go through 2 points or 3 points. Any 3 points will define a very specific circle. A circle that is tangent to 2 places with a specified radius, or a circle that is tangent to 3 objects. So those are very fun and useful methods to draw a circle. Let's go to ellipses. So EL is the keyboard command for that. There's also a button up in the top here, but the default way an ellipse is made is just by specifying the endpoints of the axis. Ellipse has 2 axes, a big one and a small one. Otherwise, if they were the same, they would be a circle. So if I just draw out a horizontal line for 15, and then that's the major axis from end to end, then the second click, well, the third click would be the radius of the second axis, which is sort of weird, but that would be from the center, the radius, I guess, of that minor axis. So minor axis. So let's just say it's 2.5. And here we go. Let's try that again, space. And this time, let's just specify the center instead of the endpoints. So C for center, and maybe I'll just use this center. So I can snap to an existing ellipsis center. And then I'll use the endpoint of one axis and then the endpoint of the next axis. So that could be anywhere that you specify. You can just type that in as like 1.5 or something. And so this now has a radius or a minor axis of 3, radius of 1.5, and a major axis of 5 or radius of 2.5. Let's try another one. And this time let's make it an arc. So I'll center, so C. So I've specified two things. This one, where I can click the center, but this is going to be an arc. And let's say I just want to track to this endpoint, and I'm going to the distance. So I'm going to just specify the axis just randomly here. And then now I have a start angle. So maybe I'll just go to the right for the start angle, and then the ending angle, have it somewhere else, maybe straight down. So this is an elliptical arc. Okay, let's say I'm done with my drawing and I want to save it for finishing up later. I still have all my layers and maybe, well, I'm just going to hit the save button, of course, or you can go to the application menu and click the save button. If you're not familiar with these icons, these are old floppy disks from way back when, and the icon has persevered. Anyway, or Control S. So in my documents, I have some drawings, and so this will be exercise 2. Okay, so I've saved this drawing. Let's about these layers just a little bit more. Let's say I want my circle on the object layer, so I can select that circle and just change the layer by choosing the layer from the list. So let me unfreeze that object layer and that. So now that circle is on. So if I hit escape to deselect it, I can see the color is a little bit different. If I turn on my line weight, I can see that it's thicker than the other lines because it has a 0.53 millimeter thickness. Okay, there are some quick tools here where you can freeze, thaw, turn on and turn off a layer. Those I do want to talk about. So let's say those two arcs need to go on my VP layer, which I'll want to freeze later. So I just put them on that layer, escape. Notice my default layer is still the 0 layer. If I wanted to change that to like the object layer, I could just select an object that's on that layer and click on the far right, well, the upper right of the series of icons here where it makes the selected objects layer the current layer. So I click on that. Now it deselected it, but now object layer is my current layer. Okay, let's freeze now well, there's two ways you can freeze a layer. You can select an object on that layer that needs to be frozen and click on freeze, which is this little snowflake, and it freezes the layer of that object. So now that I've frozen, it didn't seem to work. Oh, I have to click on it. There we go. And then enter. That's a less efficient way than let's unfreeze that here. Easy enough is to just click on sun or the corresponding snowflake on that you want to freeze. And so to me, that's a little bit quicker than going through that command. So now I've frozen my VP layer, and that's most of what we need to do. It is preferred that freezing a layer is on and off a layer, and for the simple reason of freezing a layer removes it from the redraw. So when I zoom in or out, any object on a frozen layer will not be internally redrawn, whereas on a layer that's off, it still internally redraws that layer and refigures where that object is and how big it should be. So you can get better performance characteristics by freezing rather than turning on and off a layer. Okay, I think we want to end the video here, and we'll pick it up next time. Thanks.